Well, good morning. I am Stephanie Cocagne, and I'm a counselor here in Joe Davis County. I know, Charlotte, I already explained to you where I work, but I like to go over that as well for everyone else who's participating. I own a private practice counseling business here in Galena, and I operate 1 day a week in Apple River at a wellness center. And then on Mondays and Tuesdays, I actually work for Midwest Medical Center. I'm their counselor out there. So as far as counseling goes, I'm spread out over the county, but that's okay because it's really needed in our community. So this morning, I've been asked to talk to you about, well, the topic of the program is mindful resilience, which is kind of a loaded title. As I was reading it, I was like, wow, that's kind of heavy. So I want to unpack that a little bit before we get started. So mindfulness is really just being aware of what's happening right now. So for example, even just sitting here, you may be paying attention to my voice, or you may be thinking, oh, after we leave here, I've got to go to the pig and pick up some milk or something like that. So paying attention to what's happening right now, as opposed to getting caught in our thinking, which tends to, our minds are time travelers. We can jump to the future, we can jump to the past. And so mindfulness is just asking ourselves to pay attention to what's happening right now. And that isn't natural for our brains. They're constantly scanning the environment and thinking and planning. And so mindfulness is a skill that we can really build up over time. And we'll talk about that today and why it's important. The resilience piece is really just how to get through difficulty. It could be a difficult personal situation. It could be maybe difficulty that a family member is having, or even community or global difficulty, how to really pay attention to ourselves to get through those difficult times. The three main things we'll talk about today include values, making decisions based on your values. That's number one. The second one is that mindfulness, how to know where your attention is in a given moment and how it affects you. And then the third piece is self-compassion. So oftentimes when we're in a difficult situation, our thinking can turn into worrying or even criticizing ourselves, judging ourselves. And so self-compassion says, be nice to ourselves. Notice, I'm worried, I'm upset. It says that we can get through something without being really harsh towards ourselves. And what we find is that the compassionate voice is way more effective than that critical inner voice that sometimes we develop. And so we'll talk about that today as well. The reason I think it's important to talk about values, one of my favorite books, Brene Brown is an author. She's written many books about shame and about being vulnerable. And in her book, Braving the Wilderness, she talks about living by your values and how that can be so challenging sometimes because we might have a conflict in values, or what we value might not be valued by the other party that we're talking to or engaging with. And so in her research, so Dr. Brown, she, I think, has really important research because it's qualitative. She's interviewed people, thousands of people, to come up with definitions and descriptions. What does it mean to live by your values? And so what she's found is that people who live by their personal values tend to report more enthusiasm in their life, more sense of purpose, more commitment to their decisions. They also tend to make independent decisions. So they're guided by their values as opposed to maybe different arguments that they're hearing from other people or other sources. And they tend to report overall life satisfaction as well. I'll go through those one more time. Enthusiasm, a sense of purpose, commitment, independent decision-making skills, and overall life satisfaction. So what I'll ask you to do is to get the list of values that I've provided to you. So this comes from a company, I believe it's actually out of Norway. Positivepsychology.org is the name of the website. And they really focus on what works in a person's life and building up what works. And so they provide this list of personal values. There is a lot here. So what I want you to do is spend maybe about 3 to 5 minutes going through this. And I want you to pick your top 5. There's quite a few here. So really the ones that for you are non-negotiable.
Really?
Part of the challenge is picking 5, right? Because I think we could go through this list and easily say, in some way, they're all important.
They're all important. Yeah.
And so what I've asked you to do is really narrow in on a few that are non-negotiable for you, because now I want you to pull out this worksheet.
Okay.
This is called the Choice Point Worksheet. And this is actually, you can see the citation at the bottom. It's from a book called ACT Made Simple. ACT is a kind of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy.
Huh.
And so this is one of the pillars of ACT. And what the author is saying is sometimes we're moving towards our values, sometimes we're moving away. And so what I want you to do is write your top 5 up here on the towards end, just as a reminder of what your goal, what you're moving towards when you're making decisions. Okay, and then once you have those written down, let's take a look at that handout again. So the unhooked side, when we're in a situation where we're moving towards our goals and towards our values, being unhooked usually means we feel good about those decisions. We feel confident. We believe in the choices that we're making because they're in alignment with our values.
Okay.
The hooked side is usually when we're moving away from those values. We don't always know when we've been hooked, but we'll talk a little bit about that today, what it feels like to be hooked, and then some things that anyone can do to start to unhook themselves. So let me give you an example. Let's say one of my values is I have health as well. So let's say I am in a situation where this happens. I think most people can relate, maybe not feeling great, but invited to something. So especially if it's a family activity. Now we've got, okay, are there some competing values here?
Oh, yeah.
How so?
Yeah.
What do you think? How might
Exactly. Yeah. That's a perfect example, because you want to be part of the family and participate and connect to them, but you don't feel quite great. And it's like, well, is it selfish to stay home? But if I go there, well, I make somebody else sick and then they'll be mad at me. And then you get into this.
Exactly. You perfectly described that hooked experience where, so if I said I'm moving towards health, so I'm staying home no matter what, there might be, somebody might call me and say, why weren't you there? I can't believe you didn't come. And so it is important to know when we're facing those kinds of values conflicts. So let's talk though about what it means to be hooked, or what it means to be in that position where we're being pulled between 2 different options. So another book I really love is called Self-Compassion. And it's written by another female researcher, Dr. Kristen Neff. Both women are out of Texas too, by the way. Her research focuses on self-compassion and also is qualitative in that she interviews people to get information, as opposed to quantitative. How can you measure self-compassion? Like that, a lot of psychological research is about quantitative. How do we measure it so we know if something has changed? So more and more research is coming back in a qualitative form where people are just doing interviews and finding what traits tend to be part of a self-compassionate person's life. So Dr. Neff actually identified signs of resistance, so that hooked. When we get hooked by having to make that decision, for example, between a family get together and staying home because we're not feeling well, some signs of resistance include avoidance. Well, I'm just not going to make a decision. I'm not going to think about it. I don't want to deal with it right now. Physical tension is another sign that we've been hooked by something. Rumination or overthinking. You know, those, oh, should I do it? Should I not do it? Maybe I should call my sister and find out. You know, maybe my partner can go and just explain what's going on. So overthinking. Especially if have you ever had a conversation and afterwards you're like, oh, I should have said this, and that's a sign that we've been hooked. If something is just still, we're chewing on it, that's a sign that we've been hooked. Also, overworking and overeating can be signs that we're under stress because we've been hooked by something. So those are what would be called like numbing kinds of things. If I focus on these things instead, then I don't really have to notice how I feel about this conflict. Being angry and irritable, numbing with other substances too. So drugs and alcohol, using those rather than dealing with our feelings is a way that we're also hooked. So what I want us to do is we're actually going to do it's kind of like a visualization, but it will help demonstrate the experience of being hooked, and then we'll talk about how to go about unhooking. So let me go through that list one more time of signs that we're hooked. Avoidance, physical tension, rumination, which is also overthinking, overworking, overeating, being angry and irritable, and using substances. So now we're going to do an activity to really bring some of these concepts together. So during the activity, I'm going to ask you to visualize something. You can choose if you keep your eyes open or closed. I would just say if you keep them open, you stare at something straight ahead, a few feet ahead of you, maybe this beautiful fireplace here, so that you're just kind of focusing in on kind of a blurry visual. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to close my eyes. Again, you can choose open or closed, but I want you to bring to mind a situation where you're feeling like you have to make a decision. Maybe it's something that's current, maybe it's something that's coming up, or even if you're having difficulty, think of a situation from the past that was particularly difficult for you. And just silently kind of describe to yourself what was going on, who was involved, what were your options, how did you feel? Just really bring all of that up mentally. And once that is really clear in your mind, I want you to bring your attention to your body right now. Just scanning a little bit from top to bottom, noticing as I think of this situation, do I have certain physical sensations? Do I have emotional feelings in my body? Are there thoughts that keep coming up for me? Just kind of take a few seconds to do that scan, thinking about the situation and then noticing how it's affecting your body. And then what I want you to do is just silently describe it to yourself. So it may be, I notice that my heart races. I notice that I get this sinking feeling in my stomach, or I notice that I get fidgety, or just silently label without a story, just a label. Fidgety, itchy, heaviness, whatever it is. And then I want you to consider, like, do most people in situations like this have the same reaction? Do other people feel the same way? Am I having a human reaction? Is this just something as a human being that is affecting me? And then finally, if you're able to silently ask yourself and identify, what am I resisting? Is it a decision? Is it a values conflict? Is it something different? And then if your eyes are closed, go ahead and open them. And if anyone is interested, you don't have to share the conflict, but what did you notice when I asked you to pay attention to your body? Is there anything that you notice?
I always go to my heart
Okay.
and see how it's beating, because I've been going to the doctor with heartbeat.
Oh, okay.
So
So,
what's the cause of my heartbeat?
okay. We're checking that area
Yeah, and
first.
we're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good example. Very good.
Wow.
Did you have one?
That's so, yeah, that's so interesting, Charlotte, because you go right to your heart, I go right to my stomach. I immediately thought
To
of
your
my son,
stomach.
and I could feel I felt more anxious. I could feel just like a anxiety feeling, just remembering and going over. Yeah. So
I've noticed, to even continue further, that when I'm in a situation like this, I feel it a lot of times in here, like I need
Really?
to say something, but I'm having a hard time saying it. So I feel it more almost like in here. So a few reasons why I think that activity is very important. Number one is when we just think about something stressful, our body reacts as if we're in that situation, right? So we sometimes create physical stress for something that isn't happening in this moment, right? In this moment, we're in the library, we're watching this on video, but when we think about those stressors, it can affect us physically. And so being aware of that physical resistance is sometimes one of our first indicators that something's going on. I'm not in this moment, or I need to make a decision about it. So physical resistance is something oftentimes we do pick up on. The second question about, do other people feel this way? Generally, we're hard on ourselves when we expect, like, I should know the answer, or I shouldn't feel this way. You know, most people do in a situation like this. And so that self-compassion piece is, I'm just a human being trying to figure out this situation. And so the third question of what am I resisting shifts us more into like this moment as I'm thinking, what is it that I'm resisting? Sometimes, like I said, it can be a values conflict. Do I go to the party or do I stay home? Do I call into work or do I go in? Those kinds of situations. So that exercise brings us, it kind of takes us along this line of thinking about the past, but being aware of the present and how it's impacting you right now. So what do you think are the pros and cons of resistance? So when we're kind of avoiding, or maybe we had that conversation and we're thinking, oh, wait till I see him again, I'm gonna let him have it.
yeah.
Like what what are the pros and cons of that sort of resistance? Let's start with pros. Are there pros to resisting things?
Hurting the other person?
Sometimes, yeah, you bet. It can feel like we're hurting them. Is that a pro or a con?
God.
I think it's a con. Sometimes when we've been hooked, though, we're hurting. And so we don't really care if what we're doing is hurting that other person or not. So resistance can be, I'm right, he's wrong, and I'm going to go through my head for 30 minutes about why I'm right and he's wrong.
Yeah.
And it gives me kind of this sense of, superiority for a little while, but we know, how does that really benefit the relationship?
No.
Right. And do I value being right, or do I value that relationship? That's where sometimes we get these conflicts as well. So paying attention to physical reaction, being curious, what am I resisting? And then the antidote to resistance oftentimes is just what we did. Pay attention right now. How am I thinking and feeling? Am I moving toward my values? Am I moving away? And that's that choice point. If I'm moving toward my value of health, then that's the choice I'm going to make. If it's a conflict, then we have to really just prioritize, is it family or is it health today? Knowing I can be nice to myself, forgive myself if maybe somebody's not happy that I didn't make it to the family gathering, but knowing that I valued my health and their health, and that's why I stayed home. So the self-compassion piece is really talking to yourself, sometimes like a good friend, but also something that can be very powerful is thinking of yourself as a child and being kind to that part of yourself. So, if I think of myself as a 5-year-old, would I say, you're sick, but you still have to go? No, I might say, it's okay. It's okay to stay home, rest, take care of yourself. And so self-compassion is just being very kind, because being harsh and critical tends to hook us and just make us feel even worse, and can just add to depression or anxiety. So self-compassion is really important. So just a quick recap, the 3 main points: values-based decision making, being mindful of what's happening in your body and your mind and heart at any given moment, and then self-compassion, being nice to yourself. Whatever it is, we all make mistakes. And so maybe you do something that moves away from your values, seeing if you can be kind to yourself, not in a lack of accountability way, but in a way that says, okay, I was doing the best that I could in that moment, and here's what I'll take from that, and being nice to ourselves.
You said something earlier about saying to yourself, I shouldn't feel this way. Now that really was a hit when you said that, because not only have I caught myself saying it to myself, I've had other people say it to me. And I was fairly passive when I was young. So if somebody said something like that, I would probably just accept it. Oh, I shouldn't feel that way. Well, according to whom?
Right.
And also, can you learn being hard on yourself from other people?
Oh, totally. Right. A lot of times our inner voice sounds familiar. Could be something that we were told as a child, something maybe said to us by a teacher or a coach or a boss. Definitely from the time we're born till now into the future, we're constantly taking in that information. And that's why it's important to be, compassionate to yourself, so that if somebody tells me you shouldn't feel that way, why not? It's okay to feel that way. And so, yeah, that's a great example. One of my favorite teachers in college, he calls that programming. You get this program from the time you're born, and sometimes you have to pull it away to realize it's not the
Yeah.
So anyway, any questions about any of this or anything further? If you do want more information, my website is actually galenacounseling.com. So www.galenacounseling.com. There is a contact button there. It has my phone number, and you can send me a message. And certainly, if you need anything at all, feel free to follow up with me.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming this morning.